You talking about football?
Yeah, football town. NFC North. Now let's talk football.
Welcome back, everybody, to Headed North, an NFC North podcast, and I am your host, D-Tron. This week, we've now gotten through most of the craziness in the free agency period, and we're really starting to lock in on what teams still need going into this 2023-24 season. So on today's show, we're going to be taking a look at what the critical needs are still left out there for each of the four teams. Also going to talk a little bit about free agency for the Vikings and what they've got to do to make themselves relevant, or at least keep themselves relevant in the division. And then we're of course going to talk about the NFC North saga that is the Green Bay Packers and the Jets. But before we get into the topics for today, want to touch on our sponsor from last week, who is sponsoring us again. Thank you very much. Off Racks Shop. Now, if you guys have a chance, go down to our show notes or head over to offracksshop.com. They have tons of vintage and thrifted items for you, including men's clothing, women's clothing, and accessories. So if you haven't already, definitely go and check out offracksshop.com and shop their selection. Let them know D-Tron sent you. I think there's a code that we'll put down in the show notes or in the description if you're watching on YouTube, and you guys can get 15% off your order. So head over to offracksshop.com. All right, this week we're getting the show kicked off with none other than the Green Bay Packers. Might as well get them out of the way. So I mentioned that we were going to look at what each team still needs coming into this week and headed into the draft. And really that's what we're going to focus on, the what they need to get in the draft. So I'm going to refresh you guys on the positions that everybody's going to be drafting in as we discuss who might be top talent for them to go after. There's also some draftnetwork.com write-ups on a few of the teams out of the NFC North, and they tossed out some projections. So I figured I'd go ahead and lend my opinion to their suggestions and then maybe toss out a couple of my own. So the Packers. The Packers are going in the first round. They've got the 15th pick. They got the 45th pick in the second round. And they got the 78th pick in the third round. And we're only going to go 3 rounds deep because who knows what happens once you start getting into that fourth round. But before we can really talk about who they should select, we should probably talk about Aaron Rodgers and how him and the Green Bay Packers and the Jets are at a stalemate. Because I think that's going to impact the draft picture for the Green Bay Packers. Right now, Yahoo is reporting that the reason the Aaron Rodgers and the Jets trade has stalled is because of one really important thing. So Yahoo said that in this deal, the Jets are looking to, of course, get Aaron Rodgers, and the Green Bay Packers are not even looking for a first rounder from the Jets. They're actually only trying to get a second round pick from this year's draft and then a conditional 2024 draft pick. But the reason that the Jets haven't gone through with this is because they actually want some kind of guarantee that if Rodgers only plays 1 year, that the Packers will give them a 2025 draft pick as well. Which means the Jets don't seem like they got a whole lot of confidence in Aaron Rodgers sticking around for these next 2 seasons. It doesn't sound like the $100 million that he is owed is the sticking point. Is he going to go into another dark time retreat next year and come out and decide he doesn't want to play anymore? I mean, going into this offseason, he said he was 90% on a no and 10% still play. So I think the Jets are really trying to cover themselves so that they don't find themselves stuck with Aaron Rodgers for just 1 year, but having to give up draft capital from this year and next year. So they want to be compensated some if Aaron decides that he doesn't want to continue. All right. But now that we've talked about Aaron and the Jets, which hopefully this deal is done soon, because I'm sure, I just want it to be done for Jordan Love, right? Like I want him to get from under the cloud of Aaron, and I want him to go out and be the starting quarterback. I also, as a Lions fan, want to win some games, so it'd be nice if Aaron Rodgers just figured out what he was going to do and leave. It seems like Aaron Rodgers is probably only going to settle with the Jets, because it doesn't really seem like there's too many people in the Aaron Rodgers sweepstakes. So if it's not the Jets and they can't get that deal worked out, I think there's going to be some really weird tensions happening in Green Bay. But chances are they're going to get it worked out because it just sounds like they are too far apart to still stick together as an organization. That is Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. So Green Bay, expecting Jordan Love to be the starting quarterback, Green Bay needs to put some talent around him. So their top needs going into the draft are going to be getting a wide receiver, certainly. Potentially a tight end, someone who can block and catch, because they're going to need offensive weapons. They did get rid of Tunyon, and I think, honestly, they just need to put some pieces around Jordan Love to make his life easier. And then they also need a defensive edge. They got some good defensive backs, but they need some pressure up front. That's one of the things that they were lacking last year. And so looking at who's on the board for the Green Bay Packers, I could see them going after Brian Bresee from Clemson. That's a defensive tackle, sure, but they just need some pressure up front to stop the run and get some more pressure on opposing quarterbacks. From tight end, Justin Mello from draftnetwork.com said he could see Darnell Washington as the tight end coming out of Georgia, going to Green Bay in that second round, that 45th pick. And then someone like Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers that could provide them either a speedster to get downfield or someone that can provide them a big target in the red zone. But Green Bay needs some weapons. They need them on offense and defense. And then you're going to take an automatic step back when you get rid of Aaron Rodgers for their ability to put it together on the fly. So the sooner that you plan this out and get these folks drafted and in, potentially pick up one or two free agents to help bolster that offense, the better, because they're going to need time to really mesh this thing together. Next, we're talking about the Chicago Bears. Now, the Bears have done a bang-up job in free agency. They've went out and got linebackers, two of which they paid pretty well. They went and got defensive linemen. They went and got offensive talent at the running back spot. Of course, they got DJ Moore. So Chicago is doing well for themselves. Probably an A grade, B plus most certainly in their free agency, especially because they had a bunch of money to throw around and they were not shy about using it. But coming into the draft, they still have a couple of spots that they need to shore up. So the Bears still need an offensive tackle. They got to get an edge rusher or inside defensive lineman. They just need help on the defensive line, period, because they're not really stopping anybody. And then they could also use a cornerback, honestly. The Bears defense is sort of middle of the road last year. And so they're going to need multiple individuals on that defensive side of the ball to really make an impact in the division, but certainly to get themselves anywhere in the playoffs. With that being said, a couple of options for them. So you've got Myles Murphy, who is a defensive edge out of Clemson. Could be around. Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you guys about when they're drafting. So of course they traded with the Carolina Panthers, and now instead of the first overall draft pick, they got the 9th. In the second round, they got the 53rd pick and the 61st pick, and then in the third round, they have the 64th pick. So with that on your mind, Myles Murphy as an edge coming out of Clemson would be a great defensive presence for them. Someone like Mozzie Smith out of Michigan as an interior defensive lineman. And then if you want to go on the other side of the ball, there's a couple of different options that they can go for at that tackle spot. So Matthew Bergeron, Mel Kiper, and Todd McShay are both telling the Bears to go with tackles now. So they pitched out there Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State, and then Peter Skronsky. So there's a couple of different tackles out there that would potentially make great additions to the Chicago Bears. I'm guessing that Will Anderson Jr. will likely not be available there, or Jalen Carter. But if one of those two individuals are available, I could certainly see the Bears taking them. Despite Jalen Carter having a bad pro day and having some troubles off field, and despite what I said last week about the Bears being out on him, he's talented. Like looking at his film again this week, I was like, this kid is really good, or was really good. And so I think the stresses of what he's going through right now could certainly be playing an impact on, how he weighed in, how he performed at Pro Day, all of these pieces. But he's definitely got talent. He's got power. He's disruptive. So if Jalen Carter is still available, or like I said, Will Anderson Jr., which I'm pretty sure Will Anderson Jr. is going to be off the board. But if either one of those are available, certainly I could see the Chicago Bears moving on one of those two fellas. But in the interim, I think there's some offensive tackles that would certainly bring value. I mean, Bergeron out of Syracuse is big. He's agile. So here's the thing. Justin Fields is going to move around. That's an asset of his game, and certainly something that he's going to continue to do. But I don't think Chicago wants Justin Fields to be a scramble first quarterback. I think they want him throwing the ball. And if you're going to have him doing that, you definitely got to build out that line. I could see them taking a defensive player in that first round and then trying to reach out to grab one of those offensive players with that 53rd and potentially that 61st pick in the second round. That way they can help to solidify some of that offensive front with those tackles, and then they can work on some potential help in the defense in the later rounds, like your 64th pick. You can go and get either a defensive back or a safety. There's plenty of D-backs available in the draft this year, so I could see them being able to go and get a quality defensive back with that 61st pick. So that's how I would run it if I were the Bears, which clearly I'm not. I would go and get a defensive lineman, go and get that tackle, and then go and get either a safety or a D-back. But even if Chicago decides to draft at 9 a big wide receiver or someone else to add to the list, which I don't know if you go and get another wide receiver unless you don't believe in Claypool or Mooney. But if you did, you could create quite the air game and try to maybe run some spread, which I know is not really Chicago's thing, but they could run some spread offense and really create some problems for teams that aren't deep at the defensive back position. So that's just a suggestion if you're the Chicago Bears, but I really think that loading up on some defensive linemen, especially after they went and added this defensive presence in the middle at linebacker, would ideally be the thing to build up this franchise and really make them like a front runner for taking the division. Speaking of winning the division, we got the Vikings. Now, the Vikings still need quite a bit of help. If you have been listening to the show or paying attention at all to the offseason, the Vikings haven't made much of a splash, and as you can imagine, they don't have money to do so. And so they did pick up a cornerback out of Arizona, their top-end cornerback, and brought him in to help shore up some of the back end of that defense that they lost, some veterans. But the draft, unfortunately, isn't going to help the Vikings either. They have 2 picks in the first 3 rounds. They've got the 23rd pick in the first round, and they got the 87th pick in the 3rd round. So they don't pick at all in the second round. With that being said, there's still some needs for the Minnesota Vikings. Well, plenty of needs, honestly. They are hemorrhaging players on the defensive side of the ball, and their offense is predicated on 1 or 2 really good pieces. Now, Justin Jefferson is amazing, right? Like, he's really good. So your offense can center around him. But one of the needs that the Vikings have on the offensive side of the ball is a complementary weapon at wide receiver. So you've got Osborne, but he's not really a number 2. He's a 3, maybe. Maybe a 3. Very certainly a 4. But he's an option at wide receiver. But you need someone else, especially with Thielen gone. And so if the Vikings somehow can get a hold of Quentin Johnson out of TCU, or like I mentioned with the Packers going to get someone like Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers because he's big, those could be some really important pieces to that offense that gives Kirk another weapon for this year, that gives someone else for the defense to pay attention to, taking some of the pressure off of Justin Jefferson, and it really does allow Minnesota to become more of a scoring team. Right now, Minnesota had a negative point differential coming out last year. I know I mentioned this before, but it's really it's a startling statistic. Like, you had a negative point differential. They gave up more points than they scored, but somehow won 13 games. That is a problem. They've got to have a weapon other than Justin Jefferson, because if he has an off game, their whole team is done. I mean, They got Cook, but Cook seems like he's potentially on the outs, and Madison isn't like, he's not going to light the world up. He's not Derrick Henry. So what do? You got to go and get another weapon, someone who can bring some depth to that wide receiver position or just some more talent to that offense. Again, I would go with someone like Quentin Johnson because he's big and he makes a great target down in the red zone. And then you pair him and Hockenson and Justin Jefferson. Now you've got something going on that offensive side of the ball. And then you still need a cornerback. That's the other position that the Vikings really need to go and get someone. So there is Keely Ringo out of Georgia and Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. And those two individuals could fall far enough in the draft to be taken at that 87th pick. Now, again, I think I've mentioned once or twice that this draft is deep for DBs. So if you are looking for a defensive back like the Vikings are, you can probably get one and then maybe even a flyer on another one in either the 4th or 5th round. So I think those two positions are going to be pretty key to the Vikings' success. Now, there was a report, and I don't know what website I read this on, but someone had Hendon Hooker dropping to the 3rd round somehow. Now, I know he had the injury, so his stock is down right now, but I don't see him dropping to the 3rd round. If he hadn't had that injury, he's top 5 quarterbacks being taken. But whatever. Somewhere on the internet, someone said to take Hendon Hooker for the Vikings. Now, I don't know if they were suggesting taking him at 23, which I feel like would be faulty judgment. But there's no way that they think that he's going to drop to the 87th pick. Potentially, if Minnesota has the ability to somehow move up in this draft, if they can move up to get something at the beginning of the 2nd round, then maybe he's available there. But I think that might be a bit of a stretch. But the idea behind it is you've got Kirk Cousins for at least one more year on a guaranteed contract. And if he has any sort of decent season, he's going to want to get paid. And what's the backup plan? Because there has to be a backup plan. Kirk Cousins has not exactly set the world on fire. He didn't set the world on fire before he came to Minnesota, and he's been just okay in Minnesota. So Minnesota's got to be looking forward. Now, I know maybe this year is not the year for them to go forecasting way out because they don't have the money or the draft picks to be able to do that. But you do have to think, okay, what kind of quarterback can we potentially take a flyer on in the 4th or 5th or 6th round as a potential backup plan? Because I don't know. Minnesota is just in a weird spot. They did so well last year, and for some reason there's so much anxiety from my side of the coin looking at their team and what they're going to potentially be able to do next year and all of the pieces that they somehow need to wrangle together to make it happen. And if they do make some additional moves here in free agency, those moves are definitely going to have to be cheap, and they're going to probably be 1-year deals. That way they can free up some more space going into next year and be able to make some either longer term deals or make more of a splash when it comes to free agency. And last, but of course not least, my Detroit Lions. So one of the best free agency grades that you can probably get, A- right now maybe, for the Detroit Lions. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell did a great job in free agency. They shored up one of the positions that they had the largest need for, and that was cornerback. And I'm not going to rehash all the folks that we signed, but some really good pickups. With that being said, there's still some opportunities that the defense needs to fill. So that's defensive tackle or interior defensive lineman, however you want to call it, and then a tight end. And I'm on the fence about tight end, right? We have 3 tight ends on the roster, and if given a shot, when given a shot, they did their job. Now, they're not setting the world on fire, but they don't need to. They just need to block and occasionally catch the ball. So I don't know if tight end is right at the top of my list, but Jack McKessie from draftnetwork.com listed 5 people that the Lions should go after. Wait. Let me back up. The Lions have a bunch of draft picks. In the first 3 rounds, they've got the 6th pick, the 18th pick, the 48th pick, the 55th pick, and the 81st pick. That's 2 in the first, 2 in the second, 1 in the third. So with those 5 picks, Jack McKessie from draftnetwork.com said that the Lions should select these 5 people in this order. Jalen Carter at number 6. Bijan Robinson at number 18. Sam Laporta, tight end from Iowa, at 48. Jack Campbell, linebacker out of Iowa, at 55. And then, for whatever reason, I see it again, Hendon Hooker at quarterback at 81. I get the ACL concern, but how do you guys have him drop into the 3rd round because of that? I'm not convinced, but here's my take on all of those. If Jalen Carter is available at 6, he's probably the best player available that the Lions need. And I'm still on the fence. I don't know if his potential upside outweighs the bust potential. Ooh, bust potential. If you're a Jalen Carter fan, I'm sorry. He's not going to be a bust. But is he going to be a 6th overall pick caliber? And that's what I really mean to say. Let me not doubt this man's talent. He's really good. But is he going to fulfill what we need from an inside defensive lineman? We need someone who can come in and at the very least produce at the level of Isaiah Buggs or better, right? Immediately. And you don't necessarily have to come in and be Aiden Hutchinson, but you've got to come in and make an impact right away. And this regime in Detroit is about working. They're about working. They're about grinding. If you're going to come in and you're sluggish because you haven't put in the work in the offseason, or, hey, you're going through some things, so you're not really focused on your game right now, I don't think that's going to fly. So I know that he's super talented, and if he's on the board, people say, go and get him. I would potentially take someone else. I wouldn't take Jalen at number 6. I just think there's a lot of risk there, and maybe he turns into, someone amazing in the NFL, and maybe he doesn't, but I wouldn't take a flyer on him right now if I were the Lions. Bijan Robinson, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I get what Jack is saying by, going to get him, right? Like, he's talented. He is a completely different kind of running back, and we don't have that right now. But we do have solid running backs. DeAndre Swift is really good, and if he can stay healthy and be consistent, he provides the kind of spark that you need, and he's got a couple of years under his belt, understand how the game is played. And also, we just picked up David Montgomery, who is averaging, 5 yards a carry for Chicago, putting him behind our line. He's going to play the offsetting back just like Jamal Williams did. So why would we go and get Bijan Robinson at 18 and potentially pass up on linebacker or maybe even a guard or tackle for the offensive line just to shore up our offensive line? Like, I don't know if I would go and get Bijan Robinson. Heck, we could even go and get another receiver. I know we got Jameson Williams. We've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. But then DJ Chark is gone. Who's going to fill that spot? I would potentially go with a different player at 18. Luckily, we don't need to pick up a cornerback anymore. Our defensive ends are pretty good. So I would go wide receiver at that 18 and potentially go and get a big impact player there and add him to the fold with Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown. But I wouldn't go and get Bijan Robinson. Plus, I don't think he's going to be available at 18, honestly. They said Sam Laporta. I don't know much about Sam Laporta. I do know this because I looked it up. He led Iowa in receptions, and he led Iowa in receiving yards in 2021 and 2022. So while I don't think we need a tight end, heck, we could go with a weapon, just an offensive weapon in general. I mean, if he's going to be able to give us the same kind of production or close to the production of Hockenson, I'll take him, and then we can use Brock Wright and Zylstra as blocking tight ends or someone who sneaks off the line to catch, a touchdown every couple of games. So Sam Laporta, I'm on board with him. Jack Campbell, here he's like 6'5", big Mike linebacker kind of guy. And when you've got someone like Malcolm Rodriguez, who's floating around, and then Anzalone, who we signed again, you probably want someone big and imposing in the middle of the field, someone who can play like a true Mike linebacker. So if Jack Campbell is any kind of talent like he's been scouted to be, taking him at 55 is probably a solid bet. And then I just don't see the Hendon Hooker thing. I get taking potentially a quarterback because, well, I mean, Jared Goff is really good last year, but he's been, hit or miss sometimes in his career. So having a backup plan that you can help groom for a couple of years, and if Jared is still giving you great production next year, right, you pay him. And if he's not, then you've got this person that you're sort of working toward being your starter. But I just don't think Hendon Hooker's going to be there. If he is, though, he's a quality talent. And if he comes back from that injury full force, I could see him being on the depth chart. But certainly the Lions need someone at backup quarterback that can potentially come in and win the game for you if it's on the line and Jared Goff goes down. So that is all that we got for the 4 teams in the division this week. Before we get into Around the League, I just want to say, if you or your business would like to reach the ears of listeners just like you, people who care about football in the Midwest, definitely hit us up in our show notes or YouTube down in the description and find our email address. Send us an email and let us know how we can help with your advertising needs. All right, we're going to get into Around the League, and we're just going to do some quick hits this week for Around the League. Some people that are landing in some new spots for the month of March, because we haven't recapped this recently. So Marcus Mariota went to the Eagles. I know for most people that's not going to be a really big thing, but a quality backup because Garner Minshew is gone. So having someone to back up Jalen who can potentially be mobile and still can throw the ball, I think is a solid pickup for the Eagles, and certainly a good home for Mariota to be in. Bobby Wagner signed back with the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know if Bobby just needed a vacation, just wanted to go hang out in LA, what the deal was. But Bobby left, and now Bobby's back. And I'm sure that Seattle is happy about it. And it seems like Bobby is probably too. Like, he seemed like he had a real connection with the city and that team. And so I think it would be great of him to be able to retire as a Seahawk. Honestly, I like Bobby Wagner as a player, and I really wish the Lions would have got him. But with the potential to go back home to Seattle, or back to his home squad, Seattle, I think it was certainly a good move. So I didn't mention it, but Jalen Reeves-Maybin, back with the Lions, had a stint here, left, and now he's back. And Nate Sudfeld, backup quarterback for the Lions. And I know I mentioned that the Lions need some backup quarterback help. Nate Sudfeld is a professional, so he can do the job, but certainly want to potentially go and grow someone for the starting job in the future. I don't remember if I brought up the fact that Dalton Schultz went to the Texans this week or last week, but that's a pretty big signing. Dalton Schultz was pretty good. I know if you talk to fans of Dallas, now that he's gone, they're going to tell you that he's average. But while he was there, he was an exciting player to watch. So I think going across town to rivals in Houston is going to be a really good pickup for the Houston team, especially after they get their new quarterback. They're going to be rocking and rolling with some offensive weapons. I didn't mention it, but Amani Owarie is no longer with the Lions. He is now with the Giants. So the Giants picked him up. The D-back position was actually honestly pretty full for the Lions after these most recent 3 signings. So it's probably good that he found a new home because I don't know if he would have gotten much rotational time with the Lions. And lastly, we're going to close out with some Lamar Jackson conversation. So I don't know if this is posturing by Lamar or by the Ravens, or if this is just a ploy to get him his asking price. But he came out recently and said that he requested a trade at the beginning of March, which right now the owners are at the owners meeting and they're talking about the futures of the franchise. And it sounds like Baltimore is still talking about Lamar Jackson as their starting quarterback, but it doesn't sound like Lamar is trying to be there. And if he is, that relationship feels like it's going to be pretty tainted. No lie. But Lamar is an interesting figure. He has basically been playing much of this out on Twitter, where he can talk directly to people. Being that he doesn't have an agent, he doesn't have that to sort of stand in his way. But I also think that might work against him when it comes to this negotiating his contract thing. I don't know if there's many people that are going to want to pay Lamar the kind of guaranteed money that he's asking for, especially with the injuries, the not finishing full seasons. He did have the MVP, so that's to his credit. But I think that there's more question marks, and he wants to get Deshaun kind of money, and the Browns should have never gave Deshaun that kind of money. So I don't know what's going to happen with the Lamar Jackson situation, but I'm sitting here with my popcorn, watching the same way that you guys are, on the edge of your seat, trying to figure out where he's going to go and who's going to pay all that money. All right, guys, that is it for the day. As always, I appreciate you coming along on this journey. Next week, if you decide to come back, which I really hope you do, make sure you've got your bags packed, because we are headed north. I'm D-Tron. Peace. You talking about football?
Yeah, but without NFC North. Now let's talk football.